The wind over Israel carried a strange silence the year Elijah appeared, a silence that felt like breath held between heaven and earth. The land had forgotten rain. The soil cracked open like a wounded tongue. Rivers shrank into ghosts of water that once flowed freely, and even the sky seemed tired, pale, and unwilling to give. People whispered that the gods were angry, that Baal had turned his back, that drought was the new ruler of Israel. But one man knew the truth, because the truth had whispered it into his marrow. Elijah the Tishbite, rough cloak, leather belt, eyes like burning coals, walked the dusty roads not as a wanderer, but as a messenger. And his message was one the king would not want to hear. Ahab ruled Israel, but it was Jezebel who ruled Ahab, and Jezebel did not tolerate prophets who spoke of a god she despised. She replaced altars with images of Baal, banished the truth, and filled the land with priests who bowed to the storm god while the sky remained stubbornly dry. Yet Elijah walked straight into the palace past guards, past shadows of fear, and stood before the king with a clarity that cut through the room. "As the Lord lives," he said, "there will be no dew, no rain, not even a drop, until I speak." And without waiting for an answer, he walked out. Behind him, the skies sealed shut. Elijah fled into the wilderness, but he did not run from fear, he ran on instruction. He lived by a hidden brook, and ravens brought him bread and meat. Imagine it, a prophet seated on a rock at dawn, watching the sun paint the desert gold, while two black wings descend to deliver the day's provision. It was as though creation itself bent toward him, remembering the God its people had forgotten. When even the brook dried, the voice spoke again, "Go to Zarephath." And there, in a land starving under the same judgment, Elijah found a widow gathering sticks for a final meal, before she and her son expected to die. Yet the prophet asked for bread. And the widow, trembling between despair and faith, obeyed. The flour did not run out, the oil never dried, and for a season, life in that small house grew quietly miraculous. Then the boy fell ill, breath fading until it was no more. Grief broke from the mother's throat like a long-held scream. Elijah took the child, carried him to the upper room, and cried out to the God who had sent him into this foreign land. "Let this child's life return to him," he pleaded, and life returned. Warmth flowed back into small limbs. The boy's eyes opened. The widow's tears became wonder, and Elijah stayed until the day came when the word called him back into Israel like a storm gathering strength. Years had passed. Drought ruled with an iron hand. Israel staggered under its weight, and Ahab searched desperately for Elijah, blaming him for the judgment he had only delivered. When they finally met on a dusty road, the king's voice cracked with bitterness. "Is that you, troubler of Israel?" Elijah did not flinch. "It is not I who trouble Israel, it is you and your house, who have abandoned the commandments and bowed to Baal." A challenge formed between them, like lightning seeking ground. "Gather the people," Elijah said. "Bring the prophets of Baal, 450 of them, to Mount Carmel. Today, the truth will speak with fire." Crowds climbed the mountain, murmuring, desperate, hollow with hunger. On one side stood the priests of Baal in their colorful garments, loud and confident. On the other stood Elijah, one man, dust-covered, cloak roughened by wind and wilderness. "How long will you waver between two opinions?" he called to the people. "If the Lord is God, follow him. If Baal is God, then follow him." The people were silent. Not rebellious, just unsure. Fear had weighed on them so heavily, they had forgotten courage. Elijah proposed a test. 2 bulls, 2 altars, no fire allowed. The God who answered with flame would be God indeed. Baal's prophets began early. They prayed, they chanted, they danced around the altar, their voices rising like smoke that had no fire to lift it. Hours passed. No answer. Elijah watched without mocking, at least at first. But as the sun climbed and their frenzy grew desperate, he spoke with quiet irony. "Shout louder. Perhaps he is deep in thought, or traveling, or asleep." So they shouted louder. They cut themselves. They bled on the stones. They cried until their voices cracked, but still nothing. Only silence, only sky, only the heavy truth that the God they worshipped could not hear them. Then Elijah stepped forward. He rebuilt the Lord's altar with 12 stones, one for each tribe. He dug a trench around it. He placed wood, arranged the bull, and then did something that must have seemed insane. He had them pour water over everything. Once, twice, 3 times. Water soaked the wood, the sacrifice, the ground. It filled the trench until it overflowed. Then Elijah lifted his face to the sky and prayed, not with drama or spectacle, but with the simplicity of certainty. Lord, let it be known today that you are God, and that I am your servant. Answer me, so these people will know you are turning their hearts back. And heaven answered. Fire fell, not like a spark, not like a flame, but like a storm of light. It devoured the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust. Even the water vanished in a hiss of holy heat. The people fell on their faces, trembling. This was no illusion, no staged miracle. This was revelation, power, glory, unveiled. The prophets of Baal were removed. Their deception ended, and Elijah, standing on the mountain that had become a furnace, whispered to Ahab, "Go, eat, drink, for I hear the sound of heavy rain." No cloud yet darkened the sky, but faith hears what eyes cannot see. Elijah climbed to the mountain's peak, bowed low with his face to the ground, and sent his servant to look toward the sea. "Nothing," the servant said. "Go again," Elijah replied. 7 times the servant climbed. 6 times he returned empty. But on the 7th, he hesitated. A small cloud, rising from the sea, no bigger than a man's hand. Elijah stood. That was enough. Storm winds gathered, rolling across the horizon, like the return of hope. Thunder trembled through the valleys. The heavens opened, and rain poured onto the land that had forgotten what blessing felt like. Ahab fled in his chariot, rain lashing his face, and Elijah, empowered by the hand of the Lord, ran ahead of him. Cloak whipping in the wind, feet pounding the soaked earth with a strength no man possessed naturally. It was as though God himself carried him forward. Yet even prophets grow weary. Jezebel's wrath reached him quickly. "By tomorrow you will be dead," she vowed. And Elijah, who had faced kings and false prophets, found himself crushed beneath the weight of fear, exhaustion, and loneliness. He fled into the wilderness again, collapsing under a tree and whispering his own breaking point. "I have had enough, Lord." But God does not abandon the weary. A gentle touch woke him. An angel, bread baked on coals, water in a jar, rest. Then again bread, water, rest. Heaven cared for the prophet before heaven spoke to him. Elijah traveled to Horeb, the mountain where Moses once stood. There, in the echoing cave, he heard a question that pierced him deeper than fire ever could. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" He poured out his heart, his fear, his loneliness, his frustration, and God told him to stand on the mountain, for the Lord was about to pass by. A wind tore through the rocks, shattering them, but the Lord was not in the wind. An earthquake shook the ground, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. Fire roared across the mountain, but the Lord was not in the fire. Then came a whisper gentle as a breath, and Elijah covered his face, for he knew who spoke in the stillness. The whisper told him he was not alone. 7,000 remained faithful. A successor waited, a young man named Elisha. And Elijah walked down the mountain with renewed purpose, carrying not just the memory of fire on Carmel, but the deeper truth that God speaks not only in power, but in quietness. The story of Elijah is the story of a God who answers with flame, but also comforts with a whisper. A God who confronts falsehood, but restores the weary. A God who brings fire, and then brings rain. And as you continue this journey through the stories that shaped faith across generations, remember, sometimes the fire shows you who God is, and sometimes the whisper shows you who you are. If this story stirred something in you, stay with us. More ancient voices are waiting to be heard. And if you want to continue this journey right now, explore the next story that appears on your screen. Each one holds a truth that still burns, still speaks, and still calls.